Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The House will come to order. Rabbi Cutler will offer a prayer.
First, on behalf of all of us here, to the Speaker Pro Tem, we wish you a very happy birthday, sir. Congratulations, sir. There are many paths to God, and we are choosing one that works for ourselves, but out of due respect for each other, we applaud and we recognize in each other that sacred commitment to pursue a path toward holiness. Indeed, in words of Scripture that we will read in synagogues all around the world, we will read, "Build me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them." Thus, God-given gifts have been planted within our souls, and we have been asked to use them to build something sacred, worthy of God's presence. So we encourage each other to look deep within, to hear that bot call, that voice from God, to challenge us to rise up and reach our fullest divine potential. There is holiness in this world, and it is our job to go out and seek it and build a better society. Therefore, let us all pray. God of guardian of life and liberty, we assemble in this sacred place to do your work in this state. Bless those who labor to create and implement the policies within this assembly. Due diligence. Give them discerning hearts to do your will for the betterment of all the residents of our state. Teach them to seek justice and pursue it, to choose better lives for all of us rather than a select few. Let them be reminded that they are all emissaries of sacred duty and that their job is to be one with all of us. May you all continue to do your work with vigor and integrity. May you seek ways to forge new ideals where justice and compassion work hand in hand for the safety and the elimination of social ills. Grant all of you in this sacred assembly patience and the realization that the work that has to be done is built day by day. Grant all of you that renewed sense of justice, for the Constitution and the laws of this great state are entrusted to you to be implemented. We ask blessings be upon you to seek out compassion and goodness. Go and do God's work in this world. Build me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. This is God's calling, to which the rabbinic sage Hillel said, all the rest is commentary. Go and do it. Amen. May
Amen.
God's blessing be upon you.
Visitors are invited to join the members in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A quorum being present, the clerk will read the Journal of Friday, February 5th. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I move to dispense with the further reading of the Journal of Friday, February 5th, and that the same stand approved.
Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, sir. Let me welcome everyone and welcome the Rabbi for his prayer. And I want to, before we begin with our schedule of the day, just acknowledge a few important events that have occurred in our history over the years on this day, February 8th. For instance, in 1865, Martin Robinson Delaney, a prominent abolitionist, physician, and writer, was commissioned by President Lincoln to serve as the highest rank an African American would reach in the United States Army during the Civil War when he became a major. On this day in 1922, President William G. Harding introduced the first radio to the White House. 64 years ago today, Queen Elizabeth II formally proclaimed for herself the title of Her Majesty Queen of England. I didn't know you could proclaim it yourself, but there you go. You learn as you do these. And finally, Most importantly, and the rabbi stepped on my line here, but in 1948, Jeffreyon Aubrey came into this world. It's his birthday. Legend has it because of his size, he was actually born on the 8th, 9th, and 10th, but I understand that's simply apocryphal and didn't really happen. But I want to make sure that to the Speaker Pro Tem that we all wish him a very, very happy birthday, February 8th. Happy birthday.
So happy it only happens once a year.
And we're delighted to spend it with you, Mr. Speaker. And now, if I may have the members' attention to just briefly go through our schedule for the day. Members have on their desks a main calendar. There are 20 new bills appearing on this calendar for the first time, beginning with calendar number 353 and going through to 372. After introductions and housekeeping, we will begin our work today consenting those new bills. We will then continue to consent where we left off last week's calendar at calendar number 97. Members of the following committee should take note that we will be calling these committees off the floor as we gather members together. We will have the Aging Committee, we will have the Alcoholism Committee, and finally the Veterans Affairs Committee will meet off the floor at various times during the afternoon, so people should be alert to that. Majority members should be aware there will be the need for a conference once our work on the floor is completed, and I will, of course, consult with my colleagues in the minority to see if they have any conference needs as the afternoon progresses. So with that as a general outline, Mr. Speaker, I know there are introductions. If there is housekeeping as well, this would be the appropriate time to take all that up.
We'll deal with the housekeeping first, Mr. Morelli, on a motion by Ms. Galiff, page 53, calendar number 359, bill number 1183A. Amendments are received and adopted. And now for the purposes of an introduction, Mr. Philip Steck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a tremendous pleasure for me today to introduce my own rabbi, Rabbi Matt Cutler from Congregation Gates of Heaven in the city of Schenectady. Rabbi Matt was ordained at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in New York City. He's a graduate of the State University of New York at Binghamton. Rabbi Cutler models his rabbinate after a quote in Chapters of the Fathers, a compilation of rabbinic ethical teachings from the Mishnaic period, and the saying that he favors is, find yourself a teacher, acquire yourself a friend. And I can certainly testify that it is that warm, friendly relationship that greets everyone at Congregation Gates of Heaven in the city of Schenectady. We have a number of congregants who are on staff here in the New York State Assembly, both in the majority and the minority side, and also in the New York State Senate. Rabbi Cutler is not just a leader of the Jewish community in Schenectady, but also is a leader of the entire community, very active in interfaith matters, and a leader on social justice issues, a member, for example, of the Schenectady County Human Rights Commission. And in addition, today, joining us is another leader of the Jewish community in Schenectady, Mark Weintraub, from the Schenectady Jewish Community Center, which of course provides services to people of all faiths and is in fact the largest daycare provider, according to the Business Review, in the entire capital region. So if the Speaker could extend the cordialities of the House to Rabbi Cutler and Mark Weintraub, it would be most appreciated.
Certainly. On behalf of Mr. Steck, the Speaker, and all the members, we welcome you here, Rabbi, to the New York State Assembly. We extend to the privileges of the floor. We thank you for the happy birthday, and you, of course, are always welcome here. We look for you to come back. And also to Mr. Weintraub, who is also here, we welcome you and extend the privileges of the floor. Please be always pleased to come back. Thank you. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to do an introduction. I just point the members' attention to the fact that later today we will be adopting a privilege resolution by Mr. Rivera on the ceaseless dedication of Claudette Colvin to the civil rights movement. We're very excited to have that resolution before us later today, and I know Mr. Rivera is going to introduce Ms. Colvin on the floor. But before we do that, I wanted to acknowledge a number of young people who have joined us today for the purposes of observing this very historic moment in our proceedings, and in the spirit of hearing about the incredible work of Ms. Colvin throughout the years. We are joined by a number of groups of students. The first is a group from the Bronx Educators United for Justice, which is a group of educators, students, parents, and activists concerned about the issues of racial, social, economic justice. And they are here along with a group from Flags High School in the Bronx, which is a foreign language academy for global studies. It's a multicultural, multiliterate group. It's a small high school in the South Bronx. They're joined by Aixa Rodriguez, who is the chaperone for that group. And we're delighted to have these young people in the chambers. And I know that Mr. Santa Barbara has a group as well that he would like to introduce in connection with this very, very historic day. If you would please extend the cordialities of the House to this group and thank them for being here to be a part of this very important moment in our proceedings and in this Chamber's history. And with that, if you could now go to Mr. Santa Barbara for an introduction on the same subject.
Mr. Santa Barbara, on the same subject.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In conjunction with what Mr. Morelli just talked about, today I'm pleased to introduce a group of fifth graders from East Hill Elementary from Montgomery County in the village of Canajoharie, just to the west of us in the Mohawk Valley. They are joining us here today to observe the proceedings. They've traveled more than 40 miles to be here with us today and have an educational interest in Claudette Colvin, the civil rights leader who is being honored with an assembly resolution later today, as you heard. From the start of the year, they have immersed themselves in the study of human and civil rights issues, both past and present, through literature, historical documents, and many, many other learning experiences. These students, through the history they are learning, are also learning of the importance of making our world a better place to live in. I'm very happy to have them here. They have left the classroom to join us. Mr. Speaker, if you would extend to them all the cordialities of the House and welcome them to the chamber. Thank you.
Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to join my colleague, Assemblyman Santa Barbara, as he welcomed not only the students from the district that he so well represents, but also some of the students that have traveled from the Bronx. Now, these students, both from Santa Barbara's district and the borough of the Bronx, they travel up here because they know that today is really the beginning of a very special week. This weekend we will begin in Albany to speak around the issues of the past and where we're heading as a state, as a nation in the future. We have spoken on numerous occasions about us standing on other shoulders. I standing on the shoulder of Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King. So as we speak on the Black and Puerto Rican and Hispanic Caucus weekend, and we plan for the future, these youngsters are all here. They're all here because they want to witness this chamber, this body in action. We make the decision that can make it possible for them to further their education. We try our best, this body under our speaker, not to disrupt their education. We try not to pit one group against the other. But yes, this is a very important occasion because we are going to be honoring. Quite often we say, and we mention, unsung heroes. There are so many unsung heroes. Today we have a hero who was the first person who back in 1955, March 2nd of 1955, at a young age, 15 years old, on her way to school, she refused to sit in the back of the bus. That lady's here today, and this body will do everything possible to let every student in this state know that Ms. Claudette Colvin is not a forgotten hero in the struggle for civil and human rights in people in this nation. And she also lives in the Bronx. Makes me very proud. So, Mr. Speaker, please welcome Ms. Claudette Colburn. But before you do that, how I came to know her? Because a group of responsible leaders reached out to my office, and they're here today too. They travel from so far, the Bronx, like I do, like we do, from different parts. And their names are Siddiq James. Will you please stand up, Siddiq James? Edna Thomas Granger, the best. I love the way she sings the Star Spangled Banner because she pronounced "Oh Jose, can you see" very well, and I do. Edna Thomas Granger, Lisa Allen, Williams James, Williams, okay, and Sheikh Mosa Dramet. When I met the Sheikh, he described to me what he has been doing as far as the Obama administration to get Obama to declare and give a proclamation to Ms. Claudette Colburn for actually standing up and fighting for our civil and human rights. And we do have a resolution today, but at the end of the day, we are moving forward with another resolution that will be we will be joined by the Senate, the other side, where we will call on Andrew Cuomo, the governor, to proclaim March 2nd, the day that Ms. Claudette Colburn dared to stand up and refuse her seat and pave the way for months later for Rosa Parks, which they all worked together. It was not by accident. Nothing happens in our society by accident. You have to organize. You have to mobilize. And today, more than ever, we need to struggle because Martin Luther King said, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. But we're not free of bigotry yet and racism. There are people still being chased out of our neighborhoods all over the state simply because they still look and because they dress differently. Can I see some of our youngsters get up? Chief, can I see them get up? These are the youngsters that travel from all over because some of them dress differently. They're singled out for hate and rape, hate and criminal act of violence. We're saying after today that we intend to deliver this message all over the state that any kind of violence in our society will not be tolerated. Anyone guilty of committing a violent act or an attack on the youngsters in any of our schools will face criminal charges. So it is with the intent of this resolution, as we welcome Claudette to this body, that the struggle continues to make society and the life much better for the future. You are the future. Whether you come from the Bronx or you're the students that come from I hope I can pronounce it, Canajo Harry, up here in New York. So my heart goes out. I congratulate all you students for making this trip. Welcome to Albany. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
On behalf of Mr. Rivera, Mr. Morelli, Mr. Santa Barbara, the Speaker, and all the members, we welcome both the students from the Bronx and the students from Canajoharie here to the New York State Assembly. We extend to you the privileges of the floor, and to Ms. Holder, God bless you. We are always going to be with you in thought, and if had you not done what you have done, many of us would not sit in the seats. Thank you so very much. Please always be welcomed here. Mr. Goldfeder for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to interrupt the proceedings for the purpose of an introduction, probably one of the most special introductions I've ever made on the floor. Standing next to me is not only the cutest and most beautiful girl in the chamber, she's definitely probably one of the best dressed as well. in little Madison Stewart Middleton, traveled here this morning all the way from Bayswater in Queens. Madison is a fourth grader at St. Camilla's Catholic Academy and is joined here today by her parents, Shasa and Phil Stewart Middleton. Phil is an employee of New York City Transit, and Shasa is an employee of Chase. Chase did not pay me for that either. And they're here today to bring and show Madison how we make laws in New York State and really give her a sense on what it's going to be like when she gets here to take my place whenever she is ready. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Aubrey, if you can, give her the cordialities of the floor and a warm, warm welcome.
Certainly, on behalf of Mr. Goldfeder, the Speaker, and all the members, of course, we welcome you here to the New York State Assembly. We are pleased that you have had a chance to join us and participate in our session. To you and your parents, thank you for sharing this day with us. You extended the privileges of the floor. Please come back as many times as you like until you drive Phil out of that seat. Thank you so very much. Mr. Warner, Ms. Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to interrupt the proceedings for the purposes of an introduction. We are joined here today in the chamber by 5 students who are part of the SUNY Adirondack Upward Bound program. They come from South Glens Falls, Fort Edward, Hudson Falls, and Glens Falls. And they are, the SUNY Adirondack Upward Bound program is a program federally funded to help low-income and first-generation high school students realize their dream of attending college. And it is a wonderful pleasure to welcome them here today, particularly because when I was in college, I put myself through college by being a counselor for Upward Bound. So please, Mr. Speaker, I hope that you will extend to them the privileges of the floor.
And Mr. Daniel Steck on the same topic.
Speaker, I too would like to add to Assemblywoman Warner's welcome and ask that you also welcome these 5 students from SUNY Adirondack. As many may know, but some may not, SUNY Adirondack is sponsored by Warren and Washington counties, and so that's a little bit of my district and a little bit of Kerry Warner's district. But we've got 5 students that made the trip down today, and we'd ask that you, again, extend them the cordialities of the House, and you're welcome, please.
Certainly, on behalf of Ms. Werner, Mr. Steck, the Speaker, and all the members, we welcome these upward bound students here to the New York State Assembly. We commend you on your academic achievements. We provide you with the privileges of the floor and hope that you enjoy our proceedings. Thank you so very much for being with us. Ms. Dupree for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're also joined here today by a group of students from across the North Country, a variety of schools. They participate in the SUNY Plattsburgh Upward Bound program. They're accompanied today by their director, Brian Post, and the counselor, Matt Weigel. And I would like to introduce, from Alsabo Valley, Michael Gwinnett. From Northeast Clinton, Sophia Reibel. Northern Adirondack, Violet Cheney. Saranac Central, Jacqueline Duval. Rushton Moira, Matthew Niles. And from Chattagay, Joseph Sexton. Mr. Steck also has an introduction on this, but then we know you will extend the cordialities of the House to this great group of students.
Mr. Daniel Steck, same subject. 1 minute, Mr. Steck. As we try and clear the hall, people leaving, please. Okay, Mr. Steck, please go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as was alluded to by our colleague, Ms. Dupre, in addition to those other students, 1 student from my side of the line, my side of the North Country in Essex County, we have a student from Lake Placid, Isabella Reed. So I'd ask that you welcome her and her fellow students from the North Country as well, this group of Upward Bound students, to Albany, and again, extend to them the cordialities of the House, please.
Certainly. On behalf of Mr. Dupree and Mr. Steck, we welcome these students from the North Country Upward Bound program. We also extend to you the privileges of the floor. Hope that you have had an instructive day here in Albany and that you will enjoy the proceedings as much as you can stay with us. And always remember that you are welcome here. This is the People's House. Thank you so very much. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before we begin our work, I note that Mr. Simbowitz is chomping at the bit to have the Aging Committee meet in the Speaker's conference room, and I never want to disappoint Mr. Simbowitz, so if you would not mind calling members of the Aging Committee to the Speaker's conference room.
Mr. Simbowitz will lead the Aging Committee to the conference room, and it looks like I'm old enough to join you. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, sir. If we could now go to page 3 of the main calendar and begin with Assembly Resolution 940 by Ms. Gunther, who I understand wishes to speak on the resolution.
Clerk will read.
Resolution number 940, Mrs. Gunther. Legislative resolution memorializing Governor Andrew M. Cuomo to proclaim February 20th, 2016 as Frederick Douglass Day in the state of New York, honoring the noted African-American orator, journalist, and anti-slavery leader who was a longtime resident of New York State and the city of Rochester on the 121st anniversary of his death.
Ms. Gunther on the resolution. But we'll wait a minute, Ms. Gunther. We have another group coming in. We need a little quiet as you come in, and staff back having lots of conversations. This is not the meeting room.
Now? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Frederick Douglass was one of the most prominent African-American leaders of the 19th century. His autobiography told the story of his life as a fugitive slave and still stands today as a classic piece of American literature. He worked closely with the Liberty Party, a party he helped organize to call for election of abolitionists to public office. He later published a newspaper managed and edited solely by blacks in order to disapprove the pro-slavery argument. Douglass had roots in New York, and his house on Alexander Street in Rochester was used as a station of the Underground Railroad. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to stand here today during Black History Month to proclaim February 20th as Frederick Douglass Day in the state of New York. Thank you.
On the resolution, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The resolution is adopted.
Resolution number 941, Mr. McGee. Legislative resolution memorializing Governor Andrew M. Cuomo to proclaim February 20th through the 27th, 2016 as FFA Week in the state of New York.
On the resolution, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The resolution is adopted.
Resolution number 942, Mr. Linares. Legislative resolution memorializing Governor Andrew M. Cuomo to proclaim February 2016 as Dominican Heritage Month in the state of New York.
Mr. Linares on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week we recognized Juan Pablo Duarte and a group that came and represented all Dominicans. Juan Pablo Duarte is the founding father of the Dominican Republic. Today, we recognize the contribution of all Dominicans to this great state of ours, declaring the month of February as Dominican Heritage Month. This has been done at the federal level by Congress, but we, understanding that the vast majority of Dominicans have come and landed not just in New York City, but New York State, want to highlight the significance and importance of the contributions of Dominicans as part of the fabric of this great state of ours. As diverse as it is, Dominicans of all walks of life have made this great state their home. And last year we honored a great Dominican that was reached the Hall of Fame, Pedro Martinez. I'd like to simply indicate that perhaps the greatest contribution, or one of the greatest, the United States have given the Dominican Republic, and I can say this as someone that was born and raised there, was that from 1916 to 24, when the United States occupied the entire island, they came and they introduced baseball to our country. And it is wonderful to see that one of the most important life pastime that we have in the United States is really that investment that was made back then by introducing baseball in the Dominican Republic. And it speaks to the connection that we have between the two countries. So I only use that as an example, but the connection between the two countries is strong, goes back to the time when this country became independent from England, where there was still connection back then, and that rings high today. So I want to thank all my colleagues who are supporting this resolution, and we are very proud to be part of this body, and simply want to say that we are very proud to be called Dominicans and Americans. And we want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving us this opportunity. And I would conclude by saying, que viva la República Dominicana.
Mr. Pichardo, on the same resolution. 1 minute, Mr. Pichardo. Whoever that staff people are, right in front of you, would you have them stand to the side? Excuse me, would you stay aside? Whoever staff that are collecting whatever signatures you are, will you wait until we are voting? Stay on the back. I don't want you in the aisles. Go ahead, Mr. Pichardo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to interrupt the proceedings. I want to join my colleague to recognize and take this moment to recognize Dominican Heritage Month. As my colleague alluded to earlier, we had the privilege and honor of recognizing one of the greats, not only within the Dominican community, but also within baseball in this country, in Pedro Martinez. And Pedro Martinez is definitely a shining star within our community. But there are so many other stories of working families, of individuals who are trying to do the right thing, put food on the table, make sure that the rent is paid, and make sure that their kids have a better opportunity and a future than they did when they left the Dominican Republic to chase the American dream. You know, as I said earlier, we introduced Pedro Martinez, but, you know, the stories of Dominicans expand more than that. We are actresses and actors, CEOs, leaders in academia, small business owners, teachers, athletes, elected officials, and many, many more. And these simply just encompass a very small portion of the stories that make the tapestry of Dominican culture, not only in the island, but also across this country and across this world. So I'm proud to join and be part of the 747,000 Dominicans that live within the 5 boroughs of the city of New York, and being part of this immigrant story. Like my family, like my colleague from across the way. And I just simply wanted to take this opportunity and thank my colleagues and you, Mr. Speaker, for interrupting these proceedings and taking this moment to recognize the contributions of Dominicans here and on the island and across the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the resolution, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The resolution is adopted. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, thank you, sir. I would love the opportunity for a brief interruption. I want to acknowledge a dear friend of mine who's at the back of the chamber, Marlene Bissett. Marlene is a longtime executive in the Xerox Corporation and decided to change careers and pursue her interest in the not-for-profit world, and is now the president and CEO of Catholic Family Center, which is a very large not-for-profit that provides a whole host of social services to people in our community. Marlene has been one of the leaders in our efforts in reducing poverty and moving people from crisis to self-sufficiency. She's a dear friend, and she's in town today and wanted to observe our proceedings, and I was delighted to have her on the floor. If you please could extend the cordialities and greetings of the House to Marlene Bissett.
Certainly, on behalf of Mr. Morelli, the Speaker, and all the members, we welcome you here to the New York State Assembly. We extend to you the privileges of the floor, and Xerox's loss is our gain. Thank you so very much. Please always come back and visit us. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, sir. I'd like to go to page 52 of the main calendar and begin this afternoon with calendar number 353 by Mr. Dinowitz.
Clerk will read.
Assembly 120, calendar number 353. Mr. Dinowitz, an act to amend the general business law.
The bill is laid aside.
Assembly 356, calendar number 354. Ms. Rosenthal, an act to amend the public health law.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect May 1st.
Clerk will record the vote. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, sir. I'd like to remind members this is our first vote of the day, so folks who are in the chamber should please cast their votes, and those who are still making their way over should do it as quickly as possible so they can participate in our first vote of the day.
Certainly, Mr. Morelli reminds us, first vote of the day. If you're in your seats, vote now. If you are on your way to the chamber, hurry up. Thank you.